Evelyn dropped the bundle and a single envelope slid across the linoleum, its flap catching the light as it spun away from her careful fingers. Fear tightened her chest the instant she saw the name on the fallen envelope's edge was not there. The familiar script she had lined up for decades had a missing letter. She crouched and pushed up her cardigan, ignoring the little trimmer in her hands, and began to check the windowsill, the bedside table, the narrow drawer where she always kept the ribbon. The problem was immediate and concrete. One envelope with a specific name had disappeared from the alphabetical order that kept her whole list intact. She needed that name back, or the order unraveled everything she used to find herself. Evelyn had counted names like rosary beads for years. Her ritual started each evening at exactly 9, when the care home lights softened and the other residents drifted toward television or sleep. She sat at the narrow table by the window, slid each folded paper into its place, tapped the corner 3 times, and closed the bundle with the ribbon. The stack told her who she was. The stack prevented the room from being a loose collection of photographs and dates. Now a small missing piece threatened that tether. She pushed a strand of grey hair behind her ear and scanned the floor until she could not see the white of the envelope anymore. Evelyn. Claire's voice sounded in the corridor before her shadow appeared at the door. Claire Adams moved with the kind of steady pace that made people relax. She carried a small tray and a fountain pen clipped to her pocket. Evelyn, are you all right? A letter is gone. Claire. Evelyn. Her voice was low. It's supposed to be between. And it finished with a name I can't lose. Claire set the tray down and crouched. She kept both palms flat on the floor while she searched beside Evelyn's thin shoes. Show me, Claire, show me the stack. Evelyn pressed the remaining letters together and held them out. Claire took them and laid them across her knees like a careful stack of plates. She noticed immediately the ribbon was frayed where the knot had loosened. You always tie it like this. Claire, you count them. I count them until the names line up. Evelyn answered, breath shallow. She tapped the corner of the top envelope, a motion she had performed 1,000 nights. If they fall out of order, I forget faces. Claire's expression changed. She did not say the word forget. She picked up a torn bit of paper from the baseboard. A corner of an envelope with ink in a looping hand stuck to the linoleum. Claire held it up. This is torn, she said. Someone's corner came loose. Evelyn took the torn corner without noticing her fingers shook. She read the partial letters and the name lodged like a lodged pebble in her throat. Fear was still the engine of her movements now. Her hands moved to guard the remaining stack. The ritual felt fragile. She had to rebuild it before memory slipped farther. The next morning brought Matteo Rossi into the wing. The aides shuffled him down the hall and into the room next door. Evelyn watched his arrival from her window chair, the ribbon bundle balanced beside her. She kept watching even as Claire introduced him and helped him sit. When she saw a flap of paper fall from the windowsill between the rooms, Evelyn's pulse sped. Matteo bent and picked it up without asking. He read the name on the front with a brief tightening around his mouth, the motion small enough that only Evelyn noticed. Matteo placed the envelope against his chest, then put it gently on the small table by his chair. He did not hand it over. He did not speak. He studied the back of his own hands, the skin like old leather, and Evelyn felt a new emotion bud in her chest. Suspicion. The word did not arrive as an idea. It arrived as a posture in her body. She watched him watch the name. Claire saw Evelyn's gaze. Evelyn, he's new. Matteo Rossi. Come meet him later if you like. Evelyn's answer came slow. He touched my letter. Claire moved across the short distance and lowered her voice in the way she had with all the residents. He picked it up because it landed there. Evelyn. We'll check it. At the activity table that afternoon, the room smelled of tea and glue sticks. A new puzzle lay unfinished. Residents murmured about a song on the radio. Claire arranged the table with a pencil and the old photograph she used for memory prompts. She slid Ezekiel the jigsaw piece with a smile and then gently asked Evelyn about a name. Evelyn, who is Madeline Jansen. Evelyn's mouth closed. Her hands folded over the bundle like a shield. For the first time in months, a name did not come to her. A pause stretched and filled the room with a different electricity. Claire watched Evelyn's face and tilted her head. She touched Evelyn's knuckle with a fingertip. Evelyn, do you remember Madeline? Claire, voice soft. Evelyn looked down. She could not say the words. She pressed her lips together and shook her head. The pause became a small rupture everyone in the room noticed. Matteo, who had been sitting quietly at the edge, rose and walked to the table. He placed something flat and folded between Evelyn and Claire. The envelope that had fallen that morning. Matteo did not sit. He simply set the paper down and stepped back. Claire blinked. Matteo, it came from the sill. I brought it. Evelyn's fingers hovered over the envelope. She felt suspicion change into a sharper sensation. Fear that the missing name was tied to something she did not understand. And then anger that someone could touch her ritual. Her voice came out small and brittle. Who are you, Matteo? Matteo kept his hands folded. His voice was low. My name is Matteo Rossi. I live next door. I only picked it up because paper on the floor bothers me. Claire guided the envelope between her fingers and opened it. Inside was a folded photograph and a train ticket stub, edges softened by handling. Claire straightened and showed the photograph for everyone to see. A younger woman with dark hair, a laughter line at the corner of her mouth, and a small pendant glimpsed at the throat. Printed on the ticket was the name of a ferry terminal and a city Evelyn had not said aloud in years. The ticket bore a date from 40 years earlier. Evelyn looked at the photograph. Her throat closed and then she blurted a name that sounded like a piece of brittle glass. Madeline. Her voice returned the room to motion. People leaned in. Claire kept the stub between two fingers so it would not fold. Madeline Johnson. Claire, this ticket says Verdant Ferry Terminal, June 9th. Evelyn's jaw worked. She pressed the photograph to her chest, then pushed it away, then reached for it again. Her actions were messy, hands moving too quickly, then still. She spoke in fragments. I knew her. We went to the ferry. We argued. She left the pendant on the bench. A new shift moved through Evelyn. Suspicion toward Matteo softened into confusion, then into shame when details returned. She had not meant to say the things, but the image forced a memory inside her to the surface. The angle of a pier lamp, the smell of diesel at a morning ferry, Madeline's hand striking the bench in anger. The memory was specific and stubborn. It refused to be called a blur. It named places and a sound, the ferry horn and a shouted sentence Evelyn could almost hear again. Matteo watched Evelyn hold the photograph. He nothing at first. Then he surprised them both. I know that name, he said. Madeline Johnson. Claire's pen clicked in her pocket like a small metronome. How do you know her, Matteo? She asked. Matteo kept his eyes on Evelyn. I saw that name on a ledger once, a long time ago. I used to deliver parcels for a shop near the ferry. The ledger had a list of customers. Her name was written in the same hand as this. He tapped the photograph lightly. I thought it was a woman who owed money. I never saw her face. Evelyn stared at Matteo. Her fear shifted into something sharper, accusation. Her voice rose, not loud but precise. You have someone else's ledger. You cannot have my names. Who are you to keep people on a list? Matteo's shoulders tightened. He held himself so the room could not see his hands fidget. I am not keeping anyone, he said. I picked up a paper. I mean no harm, Claire interrupted Matteo. Tell Evelyn everything you know. Tell her where you saw the ledger. Matteo them about the shop, about a ledger tied with string and a woman who came every Tuesday to collect parcels. He described the handwriting as a narrow, slanted script. He had seen a ticket like the one in the photograph once among old bills. His detail was precise. The corner of the paper had coffee stains and a thumbprint smudge, the sort of small fact that made Claire lean forward. Evelyn listened and then asked another question. Did the ledger say why Madeline left? Matteo swallowed. No, I only saw names. But there was one name near hers that I remember, because it's the name of a man who used to work at the docks. Evelyn's face paled. The room felt narrower. She reached for the photograph again and pressed it to her hand like a compass. What name? Giovanni Moreau. Matteo, I remember the handwriting near her name. The name hit Evelyn like a small, precise blow. Her hands clenched and then relaxed. She could not say why the name mattered at first, only that it did. The name dragged a picture back. A man with oil, smudged knuckles and a voice that had once called for Madeline across a dock. Evelyn's chest opened enough to let in a sentence she had kept locked away. He promised to leave her. He didn't. Claire watched Evelyn and then looked at Matteo. Matteo, did you ever meet Giovanni Moreau? Matteo hesitated and then shook his head. No. I only saw the name in ink. But the handwriting matched other slips connected to him. A new external event occurred then. Nurse Patil came through the doorway with the medicine trolley and paused when she saw the photograph. She quietly if everything was all right. The presence of an outsider stilled the exchange and turned it outward. Claire answered, "We rechecking an envelope." Nurse Patil nodded and moved on, leaving the room thinner and more exposed. Evelyn turned to Matteo and said, "You must give me the ledger. You must tell me where it is." Matteo's face closed. "I don't have it anymore," he said. "I only remember the shop." The ledger was moved. Evelyn's voice grew small. "Moved where?" Matteo's jaw worked. For the first time he made a gesture that looked like regret. "I don't know. I only remember the smell of paper and oil." Claire reached out and set her hand on Evelyn's forearm. The touch was brief and contained. Evelyn breathed. "We'll try to find out together." Evelyn felt another shift inside her. From accusation into a brittle acceptance that she could not demand what she could not prove. She handed the photograph back to Claire and let her name rest on the table between them. The activity room returned to small noises. The clink of a cup, a half-sung song on the radio. Evelyn's heart had not calmed, but she found a small, practical focus. The missing envelope, the ticket, the ledger clue. She would use those facts. That evening, Matteo knocked at her door. His knock was measured. Claire had left them alone in the corridor. Evelyn kept the remaining bundle in her lap and smoothed the ribbon with a stiff hand. "Matteo," she said. Matteo stepped into the doorway and held out the envelope he had kept folded in his palm. "I found something else," he said. "I kept this because I thought you might need it." Evelyn took the paper. Inside was a second photograph, smaller, with a corner creased. The picture showed Madeline standing beside a man with oil-streaked sleeves. The man's face was turned away. Matteo did not know how to say what he had seen next, so he placed the small photograph on the table and stood with his hands folded. Evelyn's breath hitched. The photograph gave her an image she could name. She touched the man's sleeve in the picture and felt the memory anchor. The ferry terminal bench, the pendant, the word Madeline had shouted as she left. Her fear rose for a beat, then turned into a need to hand over something she could not hold. She pressed the larger bundle into Matteo's hands. "Keep this," she said. "Keep it safe." Matteo's face changed then, from guarded to a softness that looked like relief. He took the stack with care and tucked it inside his jacket, as if storing it from rain. Claire returned that moment and saw the exchange. She retied the remaining letters with a fresh ribbon and labeled a slim folder with neat, even letters. "We'll create a backup, Claire. We'll put copies in the file cabinet and in the office. We will not let it slip again." Matteo stood in the doorway with the offered envelope clenched between his fingers. He did not say anything. He watched Evelyn move her hands in the old counting motion one more time, then stop. Her breath found a slower measure. Claire put the re-tied bundle on the windowsill and slid the folder beside it. "Evelyn, can you show me how you count? I want to learn the order." Evelyn began to explain, line by line, the names and small identifying marks she had written on the backs of envelopes. The sound of a laugh, a patch on a coat, a favored hat. She spoke in short sentences. Claire repeated the names aloud and wrote them down. Matteo listened without interrupting. When Claire closed the folder and pushed it toward the windowsill, she glanced at Matteo. "Thank you for bringing that back," she said. "Matteo, please keep it safe." Matteo nodded. He put the envelope inside his pocket and looked down at his hands. "I will," he said. The night settled around the corridor in quiet steps. Evelyn tied the ribbon one last time, pressing the knot with a thumb until it sat neat. She placed the bundle on the windowsill and watched Matteo walk back to his room with the single envelope in his pocket. Claire straightened the papers in the folder and shut the window blinds except for a narrow slit of light that crossed the sill. A new order had formed. The missing name had resurfaced as a photograph and a ticket. A man named Giovanni Moro had returned on paper into Evelyn's life. Matteo had offered the protection of his hands. Claire had arranged a practical safeguard. Evelyn felt an emotion twist inside her. Fear altered into a cautious agreement to trust a new caretaker of her ritual. She had not forgiven every doubt. She had not found every answer. But she had made a clear decision about who would hold what she could not keep. Outside the wing, distant voices passed. Inside the room, Claire tied the label to the folder and placed it in the small locked drawer near the nurse's station. The drawer would be for safekeeping. Evelyn watched her do it and then stood to leave the window. At the threshold, she paused and laid one hand on the pane of glass. If you find the ledger, tell me where you saw it." Matteo's reply was a measured promise. "I'll try," he said. Claire closed the door gently. The final sound was a soft click of the lock. Evelyn felt the knot in her chest loosen by a fraction. The chapter ended on a concrete beat. The drawer clicked shut, enclosing a new folder and the memory of a name, and Matteo walked back to his room holding one envelope between his fingers. Evelyn reached for the row of envelopes on the windowsill and felt an empty stretch of wood where paper should be. Fear tightened her throat. She let her fingertip trace the gap as if touching the missing name might call it back. The missing envelope was a concrete loss. A folded rectangle of paper she had opened and closed for decades, the one she kept between H and I on purpose. Her hands began to shake in a way she had not shown the staff before. Claire, a loud voice, small but urgent, and the name carried down the corridor. Claire arrived in the doorway with a soft lamp on her hip and a clipboard forgotten in her hand. "Evelyn, what is it?" Claire, stepping into the room with the practical speed she used for fainting spells and arguments with families. Evelyn pushed the empty space toward her with 2 fingers. "It's gone, Evelyn." She lifted her chin. The sentence came out like a report. Fear, the steady kind that had kept her relining the envelopes each dawn, moved her now to search instead of wait. She had kept the letters alphabetical because letters named people. Without the paper, a name could slip away. Claire crouched so her face was level with Evelyn's. She looked at the windowsill, at the neat rows of yellowed paper tied with ribbon, and asked direct questions. "Did you take it out earlier? Did you show it to Matteo?" Her voice had a clarity that asked for facts. Evelyn's eyes tracked past Claire to the hallway, then to the door of the common room, then to the bed where she had dropped her bundle 2 nights before, and in one motion she could still feel a single envelope had spun away across linoleum. She remembered that fall clearly. The envelope had skidded, its flap catching the overhead light, a tiny movement that had lodged itself in her chest ever since. Claire's fingers hovered over the row. "Stay seated, Evelyn. Tell me what you remember slowly." Evelyn folded her hands over her cardigan as if holding the missing space. She described aloud how she counted the envelopes each night, how she tapped the corner before opening, how she tied the ribbon just so. Claire repeated key words. Name, date, placement. The nurse's methodical questions did 2 things. They kept Evelyn anchored to the present, and they pushed the problem into language that could be acted upon. They moved into the hall with the night aide, a young man named Jonah who smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. Claire led. Evelyn followed, clutching the empty bundle she kept tucked at her feet. The corridor light hummed as they passed the nurse's station. At the far end near Matteo's door, Claire crouched and pointed to a smudge on the linoleum. The smudge was a dark smudge of ink near a scuff, a curving mark like the end of a name written hurriedly. Jonah knelt and ran a gloved finger along the edge. "Looks like ink, Nurse Claire," he said. The finger left a streak. Matteo's door stood half closed, the small brass plaque catching the corridor light. Claire knocked once, 3 quick taps. "Matteo, it's Claire. We found this." The door opened a sliver and Matteo's measured face appeared. He was already dressed in a long-sleeved shirt, one hand resting on the doorknob, the other holding a cup. For a beat he studied Evelyn in the doorway, then stepped back and invited them in without a word of explanation. Matteo set the missing envelope on the small visitor table between them. He did not place it with Evelyn's row. He put it down like evidence with the folded edge facing him. Claire bent to take it. The envelope bore a different name in a cramped script Evelyn did not recognize. Inside was a scrap with a date and a surname she had never read. Evelyn's shoulders tightened. Her voice thinned. "I don't know that name," she said. Her fingers hovered over the paper and then drew back as if the scrap might burn. Matteo watched, expression unreadable. "I found it outside your room." His voice was low. It was folded with someone else's name. "I thought it might be better kept here until morning." There was a pause in which Claire judged what to say. Why would it be outside her room? She asked, "Did anyone else come by tonight?" Matteo shook his head once. "No, I took it when I saw it there. I didn't open it because—" He stopped and set the cup down with care. "Because it wasn't mine to open." The sentence carried a small, private code. Matteo kept other people's things closed. The corridor clock read 2:10. The night aide went to fetch the reception log. Claire stood up and dusted her skirt with a motion that was both small and deliberate. "Matteo, did you see who left it?" "No." He folded his hands and shifted his weight to the table. It lay near the heater. "Someone must have brushed past the sill. I picked it up to keep it from falling. I didn't think." He paused again and his gaze slid to Evelyn's hands. Evelyn forced herself to look. Her tremor had shifted from panic to a brittle attention. Why was it not with the others? Claire moved one of Evelyn's envelopes closer, aligning the row as if physical order might pull an answer into place. Matteo cleared his throat. "There was a smudge on the floor outside your door," he said. "It had the same ink. I thought someone had dropped it. I brought it with me because I worried it would get lost in the night." The words were small. Evelyn heard them as protection. For a moment she felt less like a woman losing a name and more like a person whose things were being kept safe. They walked back toward reception when the intercom buzzed. Claire answered with her badge. The voice on the speaker was formal and male. He said he had a question about one of the residents. A man in a dark coat arrived 10 minutes later, his collar high against the chill. He introduced himself at the desk with a name Evelyn had never heard. He about Matteo directly. His hands were steady in a way that made Claire's shoulders tighten. "Do you know Matteo Rossi?" he asked. Claire read his badge and replied, "How may I help you?" The man asked where Matteo was, and whether any envelopes had been taken from the windowsill. He the question slowly, like testing the weight of an accusation. Claire answered that Matteo was in the common room. The man asked to see him. Matteo came out with Evelyn close behind, and the man walked straight toward them, eyes fixed on Matteo's face. "Matteo Rossi," he said, "we need to talk about something you picked up." His tone left no room for small talk. Elena, a middle, shift aide, hovered by the doorway, then retreated to fetch a supervisor. The man reached for the envelope on the table. Matteo stepped between him and the paper. The first clash was a quick exchange of names. "Who are you?" Matteo, voice controlled. "I asked a question." The man answered, "You picked up something that belongs to someone I represent." Claire put a hand on Matteo's arm. "Quiet but firm, sir. This is a care home. We will handle property through our logging procedure. Please speak to me if you have a concern." The man smiled with no warmth. "I'm not here to file forms. I just want the envelope." His hand moved toward the table again. Matteo blocked him with a set motion, not violent but decisive. "You will not take anything from here without paperwork." Matteo, his jaw set. The man stepped closer and said, "You don't know what you're holding, Rossi." Matteo's eyes did not leave the man's. "I know enough to keep it here," he answered. Claire felt the air tighten in her chest and said, "Sir, please back up." Jonah moved to secure the visitor's badge. The man laughed once, sharp. He reached as if to seize the paper. Matteo's hand closed over the envelope. The man's fingers brushed Matteo's. For a breath, a small scuffle happened. A shove, a harsh word, Jonah's voice raised, Claire calling for the supervisor. Evelyn stood between them without meaning to. The confrontation pulled at her like an old seam. She heard Matteo say, "You will leave now, or I will make you leave." The man's reply was a threat folded into a sentence. "You think you can hide things in here?" He reached for the envelope again. Matteo stepped forward and positioned his body between the man and the table. Evelyn's hands began to shake anew. Her breathing grew quick. She gripped the arm of her chair until the material dug into her palm. The visitor's name allowed the way you call someone who might go away. "Who are you?" The man turned his face to her for the first time and did not answer. Claire moved faster than she expected. She called the supervisor and reminded the man that this was private property. Jonah had already blocked the exit. The supervisor arrived with a clipboard and a steady voice. "He the man for identification." The man produced a card that said he represented a local historical society and that he had questions about Matteo's past. Claire held the card up and read the name. It did not match any file on the home's roster. The supervisor asked the man to step into the office while they verified his claim. He protested. Claire did not raise her voice. She read the man's ID slowly as if passing letters on a page. The man resisted being escorted away. He made a final jab at Matteo. "You keep other people's stories to yourself, Rossi." Matteo's reply was a single measured line. "I keep what I can to those who need it." The man left with a muttered warning. As the corridor closed behind him, Evelyn felt a change ripple through her body. Fear loosened into a wary relief. Her hands unclenched enough to touch the envelope on the table. Matteo pushed it gently toward her. "It's yours," he said. Evelyn's fingers hovered over the paper. Inside the envelope was the scrap with the foreign name and a date. She slid it out with the caution of someone opening a photograph. A memory aligned in specifics. The smell of citrus soap, the sound of a radio in a bar, a man laughing at a table whose face had been behind a soup-stained menu. She spoke a name she had not expected to know. Claire leaned forward. "Evelyn, say it again," she urged in a whisper. Evelyn named the person on the scrap. It caused a small rearrangement in the room. Claire's pen moved, Matteo's gaze sharpened, Jonna's posture changed. Matteo nothing for a long moment. He folded his hands as if fitting two pieces together. Then he reached into his pocket and placed a small token on the windowsill near Evelyn's bundle. An old brass button worn at the edge. He did not explain. "Claire, why that?" Matteo looked at Evelyn. "It belonged to someone who asked me to watch names. I thought it should remind her that someone is looking out." Evelyn touched the button. It was cool and nicked at the rim. The action, a small object placed in sight, changed the geometry of the evening. Where once there had been the clean pattern of envelopes, now there was an insertion. A sign that someone had marked the place. Dawn came with the soft chirp of a maintenance radio through the vents. Claire helped Evelyn reline the envelopes, using clear tape and a small labeler from the nurse's station. They worked in companionable silence at first, then with sparse sentences. "We will log each one today. Claire, we will photograph them so we have records." Evelyn nodded and placed each paper back in order, feeling each name with the tip of her finger. Matteo sat in the doorway, hands folded, watching. He did not speak, but once or twice he shifted his weight and rubbed the pad of his thumb across the lighter in his pocket, where a tiny name was engraved. By mid-morning, the supervisor had called the Historical Society and verified the man's badge was a forgery. He had no official relation to Matteo. Claire filed an incident report, precise and factual, writing the timeline in short sentences. The day moved forward because people at the home made it move. Bath schedules met, medication rounds completed. The television turned on for an afternoon program one resident favored. Each external event dispersed attention and yet left a trailing tension. Evelyn noticed the difference between something being publicly handled and a quiet, private violation. The stolen envelope had been returned, but the scrap inside suggested a link between Matteo and a life she had not expected to touch hers. That night, after visitors left and lights were dimmed, Matteo came to sit at Evelyn's bedside. Claire had already closed the curtains and left a lamp low beside the window. Matteo placed his cup on the bedside table and looked at the row of envelopes. "I didn't mean to alarm you," he said. "I only picked it up so it wouldn't get lost." His voice was low and calm. "Evelyn, why was my name mixed with another?" Matteo's fingers twined together. "Perhaps someone dropped a letter from another day. Or perhaps the night is clumsy. I don't know." He showed the scrap again with the same deliberate motion. "But the date here ties to a place I knew once. If you want, I can tell you what I know." Evelyn hesitated. The option to have someone else speak the past for her felt like handing over a fragile dish to another's hands. She nodded. "Please," she said. "Tell me only what you know for sure." Matteo, a short, clear account. The date matched a ledger he had seen decades ago in an office. The name belonged to a man who had worked with him. He used plain details. The address on a shipping manifest, the coffee-stained ledger, the sound of a bell over a shop door. Evelyn closed her eyes once, then opened them. A memory of a street she had walked with a child came into focus, a description of a door with chipping green paint, not a sentiment but a precise picture. Her fear had shifted to curiosity and then to a fragile connection. The child's name that matched an envelope initial. The revelation was small and specific. It did not solve everything, but it shifted the balance of the missing piece. Before Matteo left that night, he placed his hand on the windowsill for a moment and then removed it, leaving the brass button where he had first set it. "If anyone comes asking again," he said. Tell Claire to call me first. Claire, who had returned to put a basin away, looked up and said, we will. Thank you, Matteo. Jonah walked past with a cart and met Matteo's eye. I will keep watch by the doors tonight, Jonah. I will check the cameras every hour. The two men shared a short nod. Outside, the building's parking lot lights hummed. Inside, Evelyn tucked the scrap back into the envelope and tied the ribbon around the bundle with hands that no longer shook as wildly. The final scene closed on the windowsill. Envelopes relined, tape securing one corner, a small brass button resting beside H and I. The missing paper had returned, but its scrap had offered a new question and a new tether between two residents. Matteo's presence had turned suspicion into protection in a way Evelyn had not expected to accept. Claire logged the incident and left a note for the day shift. Monitor visitors, verify IDs, and check corridors for ink marks. Evelyn lay back with the bundle across her lap. She counted the envelopes once more with careful fingers, then set the stack down. The last sound in the room was the whisper of the ribbon as it settled. Outside the window, a delivery truck passed with a cargo door that banged and then receded, a concrete sound that broke the night. The chapter ended with a small, decisive action. Claire placed the incident report on the supervisor's desk and slid the file into the box labeled, Follow Up. The cart rattled past Evelyn's door at midnight, and a bundle leaned over the edge. Fear tightened her throat when she saw the neat ribbon slide toward the bin. She lunged from her chair before her legs fully answered, and the bundle skidded across the linoleum. That single movement, reaching fingers clamping, breath held, set the ward awake. Evelyn's hands were small and precise as she grabbed at the paper. She tapped the corner of the envelope she still held, the habit that kept names in place, and her pulse thumped under her ribcage. Fear is what made her check every label twice, what made her line a letter by its name, and what made the missing fold matter more than anyone around her understood. The central problem was visible now. Someone had almost removed her letters, and at least one had already been separated. If the envelopes left the home, the names could vanish from her daily ritual. Stop. Claire called from the doorway, voice low but sharp. Claire Adams pushed at a sleeve of blue scrubs as she crossed the corridor and reached the cart. Her hand fell on the cardboard like it belonged there. Those aren't rubbish. Claire's eyes flicked to Evelyn and then to the orderly. The night orderly froze. Sorry, nurse. They were by the window, thought they'd been cleared. He avoided Claire's gaze and began to roll the cart away. Bring it back now, Claire. She moved with a steady pace, breath even. Her hand rested on the box's edge while Evelyn crouched and slid a trembling hand beneath the ribbons. Evelyn counted aloud as she set envelopes against the windowsill. Her voice came out small, a BC. The sound of the letters was a ritual and a defense. When she reached L, she hesitated. A gap waited between K and M, like a missing tooth. Matteo, who had settled in across from her last week, watched without speaking. His hands were folded on his knees. He studied the paper as if it might give them a name out loud. Claire put a palm on Evelyn's shoulder. It's okay, Evelyn. We'll check the room. She lifted her chin toward the corridor. Her manner was efficient. She moved into action. That efficiency calmed Evelyn a fraction. She let her shoulders drop but did not stop counting. They dumped the cart's cheap contents onto the nurse's station and found most of Evelyn's envelopes tucked in a box beneath a towel. One envelope was gone. Evelyn pressed her thumb to the gap on the windowsill, as if feeling a name through wood could bring it back. Fear shifted into anger in her chest. The way her lips pressed together made Claire look at Matteo. Matteo, Claire, can you look through the box? The handwriting might tell us where it came from. Matteo rose. He moved with a controlled quiet that made the room listen. He spread the envelopes on the table and turned each so the names faced up. Matteo's fingers paused on a single flap. He called Claire over by voice only. There is an embossed seal here, he said low and careful. Claire leaned in, eyes narrow. What does it say? She asked. He did not answer at once. He traced the edge with his thumbnail, looping script. Not a resident's family note. It looks deliberate. His jaw tightened. Evelyn, who? Her voice shook in a way that made the room sharpen. Matteo hesitated and then picked the envelope up so light hit the seal. I recognize this hand. He did not name the person at first. His pause made the air thick with possibility. Claire checked the visitor log at the station while Matteo kept the envelopes still and turned them like pages. The administrator arrived by way of footsteps that made the corridor sound smaller. "Those have to be logged," he said, holding a clipboard like a shield. "Personal items can't stay unrecorded in the hall." "Safety protocol." He set his pen over the paper with an expectant look. "They belong to Evelyn Marino, and she won't have them catalogued or moved without her permission." Claire replied. Her voice remained even, but she did not let go of the bundle. "We won't remove them. Not tonight." The administrator's mouth thinned. "Late-night items get collected for inventory. If they re-unclaimed, we discard them after the formality." His hands folded around the clipboard, a practiced gesture. Evelyn pulled one envelope free and held it out. Her fingers were careful. "This is mine. These are all mine." The words like she was naming a person. She had a small gold locket at her throat, and the ribbon in the letters matched the neatness of the jewelry she always smoothed with her thumb. That gesture anchored Evelyn. She spoke with a clarity that had weight. "You can't throw people's names away." Claire's eyes met the administrator's. "They are not rubbish. They are her records. You can't take them because you want to tidy a corridor." She stepped closer. The administrator hesitated, as if the rules had a human face for the first time. While staff argued, Matteo folded one envelope open with fingers that did not tremble. Inside was a black and white photograph, creased at the edges. A man's face looked out, younger, the same square jaw Matteo wore. A name was written on the back in looping script. Matteo's lips moved once. "Giorgio," he said. The name matched the signet he kept, a detail Evelyn had never noticed until that moment. The photograph changed everything. The missing envelope no longer looked like accidental disposal. It looked like intention. Evelyn's breath left her. A new fear slid over her, not the simple fear of loss, but the suspicion that someone had wanted a particular letter. Her hands curled into the paper. "Giorgio," she whispered. Claire's expression shifted from protective to alert. She pushed the clipboard toward the administrator. "We will log this with the resident present at 9 a.m. she said in a voice that counted as order. "For now, the letters stay with Evelyn." She did not ask permission from him. The administrator opened his mouth and then closed it. He walked away with a stiff back. Matteo put the photograph on the table between them and kept his thumb on the edge of the paper, as if steadying more than a picture. "This name connects her to someone I knew," he said. "That envelope wasn't random." His tone changed. He had moved from observation to certainty. Claire sat down opposite Evelyn. "And Matteo, who is Giorgio to you, Evelyn?" she asked. Evelyn looked at the photograph like reading a line she had read before. "He was my brother's friend. He wrote to me for a while. He signed letters with that curl on the G. I kept them because he spelled my name wrong sometimes, and it made me laugh." Her voice loosened and then tightened as she recalled details. A county fair, a knock on a wooden porch, a name written wrong. She counted the ways she had kept him in her life. Matteo's eyes dropped to the signet ring at his finger. He looked older in that moment than he had all evening. He cleared his throat. "I didn't expect to find his name here." The admission landed like a small rock. "I expect trouble when names like that move around." His watch caught the corridor light. "Not for me." "For you, Evelyn." Claire reached for a pen and started a map on a scrap of paper. Visitor log times, last known deliveries, who had access to the storage closet. She spoke while she wrote. "Someone came through late tonight, or a staffer handled things without checking. We trace. We call families if needed." "Matteo, did you see any visitors sign in today?" Matteo studied the log Claire handed him and nodded slowly. A delivery was listed at 7:30 p.m. A courier. Name scribbled, no signature. That could be the moment he pinched the bridge of his nose and exhaled. Emotion shifted under his control. Suspicion moved into action. They worked until the corridor hummed small with fluorescent light and the clatter of late night routines. Every 3 or 4 paragraphs they found themselves interrupted by sound. A call on the station phone, a resident's late cough, the cart wheels. Claire chased each noise as a lead. Evelyn kept returning to the windowsill and ran her fingertips along the labels. She the names aloud again, not to recite but to remember the feeling of the letters under her hand. Around 2 in the morning, Matteo folded his coat over his arm. He moved like a man deciding, "I can keep them tonight," he said. "I will put them somewhere locked." His voice did not seek praise. It offered a solution. I won't read names without Evelyn's permission. I only need to keep them from leaving. Evelyn looked up sharply. Fear wavered into reluctant relief. She measured him with a quick, old habit she had of sizing men by the steadiness of their hands. Will you bring them back in the morning? She asked. The question was small. It contained trust wrapped in a nervous edge. Matteo answered directly yes. First thing, he folded the envelopes back into their ribbon and lifted them with care. The movement made Claire breathe out, like a person who had held in a long time. The administrator returned at 3 with a form stamped with department letters. I thought you'd want this recorded, he said, trying for helpful. Claire took it without looking up. We logged the incident in the ledger, she said. We will record the envelope count with Evelyn present in the morning. For now, they stay here. The administrator's shoulders dropped a touch. Paper rules, but human hands had already chosen. Before Matteo left, Evelyn pressed a single envelope into his hands. Keep this near your skin, she said, meaning more than the warmth of a pocket. If you forget what it looks like, the names might drift away. The sentence had no metaphor. It was a practical instruction wrapped in trembling faith. Matteo slid the envelope into his inner coat and nodded. They arranged the remaining envelopes on the sill with new, small written cards tucked under the ribbon. Who will care, a date, and Claire's name. Claire wrote with that steady pen she always carried clipped to her pocket. She walked back and forth between the station and the window like a person mending a tear. Each step was an action that pushed the night forward. At one point the hallway grew silent and a folded slip of paper slid under Evelyn's door as if delivered by a hand that understood timing. Matteo found it before Claire did. He opened it and read 3 words, deliver them tonight. The sentence was short, specific, and enough to make someone move from fear into protective action. Matteo looked up. His face set itself into a plan. Someone knows they exist now and wants one envelope in particular, he said. We should assume intent. The shift from loss to threat sharpened how they moved. They stopped talking around Evelyn and began planning. They opened one envelope with Evelyn's permission. Inside was the photograph and a folded slip with a name and a date. The name matched the signet ring on Matteo's hand. The date placed the letter in a summer when Matteo had been younger, when decisions had been different. Claire read the slip aloud, voice steady. June 12, 1985. She looked at Evelyn. Do you remember this day? Evelyn nodded slowly and told them about a picnic, a disagreement that had ended in silence, and a promise made in a hurry. The detail anchored her and revealed a link she had not expected to matter now. The photograph connected her to Matteo's past and, with that, to a reason why someone might want the letter. The twist reframed Matteo from bystander to protector who carried history in his pockets. Outside, a car passed slowly and its tires hissed on wet asphalt. Claire checked the CKV feed at the station and rewound until the feed showed a courier leaving at 7:20. Name unreadable. The small discovery was a new action. We'll talk to reception tomorrow and check deliveries, Claire, and I'll ask families if anyone sent or received unusual mail. She set the pen down with a soft click. Matteo kept the envelopes close to his chest when he left. He walked down the corridor with slow, controlled steps. Evelyn followed to the door and watched him for a long moment. He looked back once and gave a single nod. His face said what his speech often did not. A quiet oath. That night Evelyn could not sleep. She kept getting up and smoothing the ribbon on the empty spot at the windowsill. Each time she did it, she tested whether the name might reveal itself. The ritual felt smaller now, vulnerable to other people's hands. The fear became a careful watch. She counted again aloud, until sleep took the edge off. At dawn, Matteo returned with the letters in a small leather case. Claire had written a card stating who would be responsible for them while Evelyn slept. They laid the envelopes on the windowsill one by one. Matteo placed the photograph on top and then wrote his own small note. Held by Matteo Rossi tonight, Evelyn felt her shoulders relax in a way that showed relief rather than epiphany. She smoothed the threadbare knitted cardigan around her shoulders and touched the leaf brooch she wore. Actions made the change permanent. Words alone had not. Claire crossed the sill behind them and set the small card under the ribbons. She did not make a speech. She only moved with the practical mechanics of care. They counted names aloud and checked the list against the ledger. Claire read the card she had written the night before, and then wrote a second line. Emergency contacts and a short note on procedure. She handed a copy to Matteo. If anything else moves, bring it to me immediately. She said, I'll call reception. I'll stay with you if you like. The offer was simple. It made Evelyn fold the ribbons with deliberate fingers. Matteo met Evelyn's eyes. I won't let the letters go far without you knowing, he promised. He touched the envelope in his hand and then pulled back like the gesture itself was a vow. Evelyn's mouth brushed a smile and then closed. Her voice held caution and something like gratitude. Thank you, Matteo. By mid-morning, the administrator had signed the ledger in a different mood. The house kept to rules, but the people who lived there also made exceptions. The missing envelope remained missing, but the photograph gave a new direction. It suggested someone from Matteo's world had reason to seek a particular name. That discovery required action beyond counting and recording. It required trust. Later, Claire sat with Evelyn while Matteo went to reception to request the courier manifest. They ate a small slice of sponge cake and drank tea. Claire tilted her head and asked specific questions about neighbors, deliveries, and anyone who might have visited. During the afternoon, the courier came. Evelyn answered in short, clear sentences. She stories about misaddressed letters and about how she once misread a name at a bus stop and had chased the stranger for an apology. The anecdotes grounded her and showed how she protected names the way people protect photos. An hour after Matteo returned, he set a small wooden box on the table and placed the leather case inside. He locked it and slid the key into Claire's palm. Keep it in the station safe until we can check everything, he said. Claire nodded and pocketed the key into a zipped compartment of her bag. That small exchange redistributed duty. Responsibility shifted from one person to an ensemble. The administrator called the family number listed on Evelyn's records and left a message about the incident. Before he left, he paused at the doorway and said, We'll review staff procedures. Claire answered without looking up, We already are. She had a plan typed into her notes. Trace the courier, verify the night's staffing, tighten handoffs, and make sure residents' personal items stayed with them unless explicitly relinquished. At noon, a family member of another resident stopped by and saw the envelopes lined on the sill. Are those letters important? She asked. Claire explained without dramatizing, they are Ms. Marino's records and memories. They stay labeled and with her unless she says otherwise. The woman nodded and said nothing more. The visit served as a small external check. Other people in the home noticed, and that attention added another layer of quiet safety. In the afternoon, Claire and Matteo sat across from Evelyn and opened another envelope with her permission. Inside was a letter that mentioned a place where Evelyn had once worked and a key phrase about a lost lunchbox that only she and one neighbor would know. The detail proved the letters were not for taking at random. Whoever sought that missing envelope had a reason tied to a person and a history. Matteo looked up and said, We will not let one missing piece undo the rest. We will find who took it and why. The tone had moved from suspicion to resolve. Claire leaned forward and wrote down contacts and times for follow-up calls. Each action they took tightened the net around the problem. A mid-afternoon knock sounded at Evelyn's door. She opened it to find the night orderly who had almost wheeled the cart away. He had come with a small apology and a note. I didn't know they were from Mims. Marino, he said. Someone me to clean up by the window and I thought it was trash. His hands were empty. He offered the slip to Evelyn and then left as if relieved. Evelyn read the note and found a hurried name scrawled at the bottom. A courier company. The details suggested the missing envelope had left the home in a labeled hand and might be traceable. Claire made the call. Matteo accompanied her. They spoke with a representative who agreed to search logs and to confirm the driver assigned at 7:30. The call gave them a lead, slender but real. As dusk settled, the envelopes lay neat on the sill with a small index card. Protected by Matteo Rossi and Claire Adams, Evelyn smoothed the ribbons and then, for the first time since the night began, set the photograph beside the stack. She did not ask to keep it. She placed it between two letters as if returning an old friend to its place. Matteo closed the window gently and turned the deadbolt. He made the action precise. His fingers brushed the frame. Then he walked to the door and left the key with Claire. She put it into a drawer marked resident items and slid the drawer closed. The action was quiet, bureaucratic, and final. It made the night's decisions physical. Before he left, Matteo took Evelyn's hand for a moment. He did not say sentiment. He gave a practical promise. "I'll be here tomorrow at first light to review the courier's report with you," he said. Evelyn nodded and pressed his fingers. Her hands trembled once and then steadied. At the window, the envelopes sat in order. The empty spot where the missing letter once lay was still visible, a practical reminder that not all things could be returned. But the group had turned fear into procedure, counting names, securing paper, tracing deliveries, and involving others. Claire had written down the steps and Matteo had carried the case. Evelyn had relinquished a ritual for a night, and in that exchange, accepted help that kept the ritual alive. When Matteo closed the door behind him and the corridor light clicked off, the house settled into ordinary movement. Footsteps passed, a kettle boiled, staff moved with lists. Evelyn smoothed her cardigan and checked the ribbons one last time. She placed her palm over the top envelope and felt the texture of old paper and pencil marks. She counted aloud once more, not because she needed to prove anything to anyone, but because saying each name kept them present. Someone knocked at the front desk 3 minutes before dawn. It was the courier's supervisor with a list of deliveries and a hesitant apology. He had a photograph of the driver who had worked at 7:30. Claire took the paper with gloved hands and read the name aloud. The discovery promised action. A route to the missing envelope. They had a direction now. They had not recovered what was gone. They had, however, built a new order. The envelopes were labeled, recorded, and locked for the night. The missing envelope had turned a private ritual into a shared responsibility. The night ended not with a poet's image, but with a closed drawer, a recorded ledger, and a man who carried a leather case down the hall. Evelyn felt exhaustion, relief, and a steady calm that came from practical measures being taken. The final gesture was small and concrete. Matteo set the case on the station counter. Claire slid the key into her pocket, and Evelyn turned the page of a letter she had left open and whispered the name on it aloud. "Giorgio," she said. The word sat on the table. It was not a promise of closure, only a fact that they would act on. Matteo left with the photograph and the envelopes safe for now, and Claire logged a call to the courier company. The night had taken a risk and returned a plan. Matteo closed the station door gently behind him and pocketed the key. The lock clicked shut. That single sound finished the chapter of the night. A protective act recorded and set in motion. Evelyn rested in her chair and let the ritual stand, this time with other hands keeping watch. When the door clicked, the room did not fill with grand statements. It filled with quiet actions. A ledger signed, a key placed in a pocket, a photograph set down, a promise kept in practice. The last sound of the night was the lock engaging and a clear, practical fact. The letters were now under guard, and someone at reception had a driver to question. That was the outcome they needed. They would follow the trail in daylight. For now, the envelope sat on the windowsill, labeled and secured, and Evelyn breathed through a slow, steady count of names once more.